Now we are going to talk about the topics related to object-oriented programming, or in short OOP. The very first concept that we want to talk about is class. Till now, when I want to explain something, I normally start small and then explain the harder topics. Now I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to show you a complete class and then we will talk about each part. Here is my class. Let's first learn about the definition. When we want to define a class, all we have to do is to write class, the name of the class, for example in this case human, name of the class, and then brackets. That's it. Here we can add the contents of our new class. Now, what are properties? Properties are variables inside the class. For example, here we have a variable called name inside the class human. So this is the property of human. Age is a property of human. Year born is a property of human. Each property has two parts. The first part is the access modifier, like private, and the second part is the name. Name of the property has the structure and the limitation of a normal variable. It's the same thing. So the first letter cannot be a number. We can use alphabets and numbers and underscore in the name and so on. But what about access modifiers? There are three access modifiers. First is private, second is protected, and the third is public. Private means only the class itself can access it. Otherwise, if you try to access it from another class, from another function, it's going to throw an error. Protected means the class itself and its inherited classes can access it. We will talk about it inheritance in details a bit later. And public means anyone can access this property. As I said, we will talk about these access modifiers in details in the inheritance section. The next thing is a constructor. Like here, as you can see, the name is special, 2 underscores and construct. Every class has this function by default. When we create an object of that class, construct is the very first function that this class will run. So this function will be run before anything else. We do not need to define the construct, but you can. In this case, for example, if I wanted to create an object for this human, I would write, I don't know, human equals to new human. Here, when I call new human, it will run this construct function. And here I need to pass a name and a year born. So for example, I can say name is AMIR and year born is 1994. Okay, it will create an object and with the name AMIR and the year born of 1994, it will run this construct function before anything else. Now let's talk about methods. Functions like calculate age, get name, and get age are all methods. Functions inside the class are like normal functions. The only difference is that the functions inside the class have access modifiers, like the properties that we have talked about: private, protected, and public. Next, talk about this keyword, which is with $, like this keyword. What is this keyword? Here, as you can see it here, as you can see it here, as you can see it here, and here, and here. What does it mean? Well, this is a very important keyword and refers to the current instance, current object that has been made from this class. For example, here, when I said new human, AMIR and 1994, it will create an object for me with the name AMIR and the year born 1994. So if I create another human like Jack 1998, and let's call it Jack, Now inside this object, this age and this name refers to Jack and 1998. But for human with AMIR, when we say this name, it will return AMIR because this refers to this, but in this object, this refers to this. Now let's talk about this. As you have probably seen here, we have it here, we have it here, and when even we want to run a function, we can say human, and we use this and access those functions. What is this? Why do we use this? It means to get this method of this object. And if we had some public properties, public like test, and if we had something like that, we could also use this to get that public property. Or inside the class, after this, we could use this. For example, here, this calculate age, this name. If we had an array, we would call it like, I don't know, my array and key. Yeah. But with objects, instead of doing that, it would be object and key or function or name or property or anything else. This is one of the difference between objects and arrays. So we can access the properties and methods like this, but inside an array, we should call it like this to get a value. And the last thing we are going to talk about in this section is object versus class. Object versus class. What's their difference? I kept saying class and object. So what's their difference? The class is a class itself. Human. Human is the class. When we use the new keyword and instantiate this class, we are creating a new instance of this class. This new instance is called an object. This is an object of this class. This is an object of this class. So for example, Jack is an object of human. This is the end of this section. Let's go to the next section and talk about other topics in object-oriented programming. Now let's talk about inheritance. Inheritance is when a class extends another class. It means that the new class has all the properties and methods of the old class, plus the things that it has on its own. Understanding inheritance is very important because it helps you avoid writing duplicated code, and it also helps you have very well structured classes. Let me give you an example. Electric cars are still cars. They can do everything that a car can, plus some new functionalities. So now let's bring this English sentence to code. As I said, electric cars are cars, but with extra functionality. Yeah, this is my sentence. So we have a class car, and this car can drive. So let's say it has a public function drive, and when I call this drive, it would echo that car is driving. Okay, perfect. Now I have an electric car. Let's say class electric car, and this electric car can drive, and also it can do something else. For example, it can have electronic power control unit. Electronic power control unit. So let's call this function EPCU, and let's say I am the electric power control unit. Okay, so it has that extra thing. At the moment, as you can see, I have a code here, I have a code here. It does exactly the same thing. This is literally a type of car. So instead of having this duplicated code, I could say, okay, electric car extends car. Now I can remove this function, and my electric car will have the functionality of driving plus EPCU function. Now let's say we are going to build a Tesla. Okay, Tesla is an electric car, but it has extra functionalities. For example, it can drive automatically. So instead of writing a class Tesla, and this Tesla would have a function to drive, because it's a car, obviously it needs to drive. It also has a PCU because it's an electric car, and it also has a function, public function, that drives automatically. So auto drive. Okay, and in this function, let's say it says, I got this, you can sleep. Perfect. Now, as you can see, again, this part is duplicated. It is from electric car, and this part is from the general car itself. So I can remove this part and remove this part and simply extend electric car. Now my Tesla can drive automatically. It has EPCU and it can drive. So let's see all of them in action. Let's say, okay, Tesla, let's create an object first. Tesla is a new Tesla. Okay, and this Tesla can auto drive. Let's see what we'll get. PHP index.php. As you can see, it says, I got this, you can sleep. But if I change it to electric car does not have electric car does not have auto drive. As you can see, if I run this code, I will get an error. Call to undefined method electric car auto drive, because electric car is not Tesla, but Tesla is electric car. That's why we have the functionality. Now I can also access other things. For example, I can say EPCU and it will still work. Exactly. Let me comment this part out and run the code again. I am the electric power control unit. It works perfectly. I can also drive, no problem, because I'm still a car. Car is driving, perfect. But if I change it, for example, to car and car and car, it can drive, but does it have EPCU? Obviously not, because a car is not an electric car. An electric car is a car. The opposite relationship here is not true. Electric car extends car. Electric car has all the functionalities of car, but car has only the functionalities of itself. It does not have access to functionalities of this or this. That's awesome, right? One last thing. Do you remember I said I will explain inheritance and access modifiers later? So let's check the access modifiers again. Private meant only itself, right? Private is only itself. Then we had protected. Protected meant itself and the children. The children here, electric car is a child of car. Tesla is a child of electric car. These are children. So protected means itself and the children. And public means everyone. Yeah, here when I call EPCU, I'm using a public function. Or autodrive, I'm using a public function. Let's bring Tesla back. Let's say Tesla. And if I change it to private, I will get an error. As you can see, even my IDE recognized that. And if I run the code, PHP index.php, I will get an error. Call to private method. If I change it to protected, again, I will get an error. Call to protected method. But if I change it back to public, I can run it again, because everyone can access a public function or a property. Now let's say this Tesla wants to access this EPCU, but public should not be able to run this code. So this one, if I call it to private, even Tesla cannot access this function. But if I change it to protected, then everyone cannot access this function from Tesla. Let's say Tesla is Tesla, and Tesla, I want to run EPCU. I cannot do that. I will get an error. It says call to protected method. But inside the Tesla, I can run this method because it's protected and Tesla as a child to electric car can access this function. So here I could say run this and get the EPCU because it's a function for my parent. So I have access to this with the this keyword, but here in public I do not have access. So here if I run auto drive again, it should echo this part and then echo this part. Let's see. As you can see, I got this. You can slip from this part, and I am an electric power control unit from this part. So that way I could get access to this function. As public access, it wouldn't be possible. I will get an error. And private means only the car itself. So if I change driving to private, now Tesla can no longer drive. It can only auto drive and it only can echo I am the electric power control unit. Because electric car as a child to car does not have access to this private function. This is the end of inheritance. With extending classes and the knowledge of inheritance, you can have very few lines of code but get access to a lot of functionalities. So it's a very important topic of object-oriented programming. Make sure to practice and understand this section very well. Now let's go to the next topic. Now let's talk about static. Till now, whenever we wanted to call a function inside a class, we created a new instance of that class and then called the method. Something like this. We had this class human, and then when we want to create that human, we said, okay, I have human equals to new human. And then when we wanted to use a function say hello, we said human say hello, like that. And if I run the code right now, php index.php, I will call this function echo hello world, my name is the name. Okay, but what if we didn't want to create an instance every time we want to call a function of a class? Then we can use static methods and properties. Inside the class, we can define a function as static by just adding the static keyword to it. Public static function. Then when we want to call it, we use this instead of this. So we use two colons, and then we don't need to instantiate the class. So now, rather than writing human is new human, human say hello, I can simply call the class and then use two colons and then run the method of that class like this. I can comment this part out. I will explain about this part a bit later. So for right now, let's just write human. Now if I run this file, I will get hello world, my name is human from here, because this one is static, this is static. I didn't have to instantiate it, I didn't have to create a new object, and I could run it like this without any problem. So now let's talk about this versus self. Did you notice that here when I had this name, my IDE identified this as an error? Well, inside the static class, if you want to get the value of a property, you cannot use this keyword because we have not created an object. This is for when we use an object, when we create an object and then it refers to the object itself. But here we didn't create a new object. So how can I get access to this property? First of all, when we use static, the property that we want to access should also be static, like private static name human. And then rather than using this, I can use self, and rather than using arrow, I can use two colons, and then I will write the variable and the methods inside that class. So right now this self refers to human, and inside the human we are calling an static property, which is this one, name. So now if I run the code again, this will work without any problem. If I change it this, I will run it again, and now it has changed, no problem. So this was our static human. Let's change it to static human, and let's change it here, and let me bring it to the usual form, human for non-static class and methods. For non-static methods and function, this would be this name in order to compare both of them. So, and let's bring that back here. So we had human, hello world, I am a human, my name is that, and here I am a static human. So let's see both of them. Here, hello world, I am a human, it's coming from this part. My name is AMIR, and hello world, I am a static human, it's coming from this part. My name is AMIR. These two are two ways to work with them. Here we have the object, here we are calling the class directly and using static methods. Now let's go to the next topic. Now let's talk about namespace. Do you remember when we talked about classes and inheritance? There is an important issue. You cannot have two classes with the same name. You will get an error. And the namespace is the solution to this problem. What is namespace? Namespace is like putting the classes in a group. As long as two classes are in different groups, they can have the same name. It helps you solve the problem in a very organized manner. So let's see an example. Here I have index.php. Let me create another file, class A, and let's create another file, class B. Okay, I want to create a class with the name order. This order will have a public function and with the name of handle, and this handle echoes that done. Okay, the order is done, I have handled it. Class A has the same class order that has a function called handle and it echoes done. Okay, now inside my current file in index.php, I want to require both of them. Require once class A, and I want to require class B as well. Okay, now even this part is going to give me an error because as I said before, require is going to bring all those classes here. It says okay, class order, and then it will copy this content from here and it will bring it here, and it tells, oh, order, we already have order class, I cannot require that, it's impossible, it's going to throw an error. So let's see what happens. php index.php, as you can see, cannot declare class order because the name is already in use. Okay, so what's the solution here? The first solution is I can simply go there and I change it to, okay, movie order, and I don't know, hotel order. Okay, now if I go there and require them because the name of the classes are different, the problem is solved, no problem. This could be a good solution, but you can imagine in a large project with many classes, naming the classes can be a huge problem for us because every class has to be unique. No two classes can have the same name. It would be terrible. What's a better solution? Well, namespace. So let me change the name of the classes back to order. Namespace, as I said, is like putting the classes in a group, and as long as the two classes are in different group, they can have the same name. So let's see. Namespace should be the very first thing that we define in the folder. Here, for example, I can say namespace equals to, I don't know, book, and here class B is namespace with movie. So I am putting these order class in different groups. Here this order is in a movie group and this order is in a book group. Now if I require both of them, although both of them have the same name, I'm not going to get an error. Perfect. Now let's use them. If I want to use them, I can say okay, book order equals to new. If I call order, I'm going to get an error because it has no idea, because right now I do not have any order. I have put them in different classes. Here it says class order not found. It cannot find them because when we put them in different groups, we have to specify the group as well. So I want to get the order that is in namespace of book. So I should call book order. Now if I run this, no problem, I can easily get that object and run the handle method. So if I run it again, it's going to echo done. I can do the same with movie. I can create, okay, the other one was movie, right? Yeah, movie order equals to new, the namespace of that class, which was movie, and the class name itself, which was order. Now I can use this movie order and say movie order handle. Perfect. Now if I comment this part out, I can easily run this function. If I keep both of them, I still can run both of the function. I should get 2 dones. Let's see, done. Perfect. One important note before we end this section is that namespace should be declared before anything else. This should be the very first thing in your class file. Nothing before it should be echoed or printed, otherwise you will get an error. For example, if I come here and say echo here, even my IDE says, hey, what are you doing? If I run it, a namespace declaration statement has to be with the very first statement or after any declare call in the script in this file. Yeah, as you can see here, PHP tells me that namespace should be the very first thing you do. Do not echo, do not print something. Just first define your namespace and then do whatever you want. This is the end of this section for namespaces. Let's go to the next topic. Now let's talk about method chaining. I have a class here. It's called human. It has 2 properties, name and age. Then I have 3 public methods. The first one gets the name and update the property. The second one gets the age and update the property. And the last one will return, hello, my name is this and I am this years old. I create a new instance. Then I will set the name to AMIR and set the age to 28. Then I say echo AMIR introduce, which would say, hello, my name is AMIR and I am 28 years old. Now, as you can see, when we want to call set name and set age methods, we should call them from our object. It's okay, but I want to achieve something like this. I want to make it AMIR set name, and instead of using the object again, I want to chain the methods and call the next method without any problem. So I want to say set age 28. I want to be able to write something like this, to be able to chain the methods. But at the moment, if I run the code, I will get an error. Set age a null. What should we do? The other one works perfectly fine. Let me run that. And as you can see, it says, hello, my name is Amir and I am 28 years old. No problem. So in order to do something like this, what should we do? It's very easy. At the end of the methods that are going to be chained, return the object itself. What do I mean by that? Do you remember? We said this refers to the object itself. So let's return this easily. Return this. And for set name, I can do the same thing. Return this. Let me change return. That's it. Now I can simply chain all my methods. I can say set name, set age, and because both of them are returning the object itself, I can also bring introduce at the end. And in one line, I can achieve the whole thing. Hello, my name is Amir and I am 28 years old without any problem. The first method will change the name, the second method will change the age, and the last one will return this string, and then we echo that. And notice I don't want to chain introduce, that's why I didn't return the object. Instead, I returned the message itself. Now, the interesting thing is that when you chain the methods like this, the order of the methods that return the object doesn't matter, unless your functions depend on each other internally. For example, I could here simply set the age first and then the name, and it would still work, no problem. But if I had some dependent function internally, then it would be a problem. For example, if my I don't know, my age was somehow dependent on the name, so if there was no name I couldn't set the age, then I had to call set name first. But now, because there is no dependency between the methods, I can easily change their order. So set name, set age, or set age, set name, and then I will call introduce. It's super clean and super easy. You could also have them in different lines, so it would be even more readable. It's super easy and very powerful. Now let's go to the next topic. Now we are going to talk about interface. Interface is like a skeleton for the class. It doesn't implement the functions. It just says what functions are needed in this class and what arguments should those functions have. Let me show you an example. I can define it like interface, and then the name of the interface, I can say human, for example, and then human rather than human. Then I just need to specify the name of the functions. For example, I can say, okay, this interface needs to have a public function with the name say name, and then it has to have a function with public function get age, and this get age will have an integer year born as the argument. That's it. I don't need to specify anything else. This is just a skeleton. As you can see, we have not implemented those functions. We are just saying that if you are creating a human, you should have this function with those arguments. But inside a class, we can implement those functions and do everything else. So how can I tell my class that your skeleton should be like this interface that I have defined here? I can use the implement keyword. So let's say I have a class. This class is AMIR, and AMIR is a human. So the structure should be like human as we have defined above. Right now, even my IDE shows that I have an error. So let's see what PHP tells me when I run the code. Here it tells me that class AMIR contains two methods. Therefore, they must be declared, abstract, or implement the remaining methods. What does it mean? It means that here inside my class, I have to have two methods. Here, my IDE PHP Storm is going to help me. PHP Storm is going to add them for me. If you are not using PHP Storm, you can simply define those functions yourself. I need a public function with the name say name, and I also need a public function with the name get age, and this get age should get an integer here. Now I don't get any error. If I run the code, no problem at all. Now the way you implement those functions are completely dependent on you, and you cannot specify how you should implement a function inside the interface, but as long as you have the same structure, it's okay. It's perfect. Now here, for example, I can say, okay, say name, echo, my name is Amir. And if I run get age, I can say echo, I am years old. And inside that, I can write, okay, date year minus date year minus this year born. So I'm getting the year. I am going to calculate it. So if I create a new object like AMIR is new AMIR, and inside this I say AMIR say name, I will get echo my name is AMIR, perfect. And if I run get age, and I specify, okay, 1994. This is going to calculate my age. I am 28 years old. Perfect. We can have other methods inside this class. For example, public fly echo I can't fly. Public function fly I cannot fly. Okay. So this AMIR can also fly. As you have noticed, this fly function is not in the interface. It doesn't matter. I can have other methods inside my class, but these two are required. If I don't implement them, I will get an error. If I comment them out, I will get an error because it says, hey, your class is structurally correct. Okay, there is nothing wrong here, but since you have said that it implements human interface, you have to specify those functions as well. Now if I run it again, it's going to work again. So you might ask, why should I write the interface? I will write the class instead and I will write the functions. There is no need to use the interface. Well, in small projects, when you are going to do all the coding yourself, it might not matter. But when your project gets a little bit bigger and other developers start working on it as well, interface is like your savior. It forces your code to keep organized and clean. So anyone that comes and say, okay, I want to implement human, they have to write these functions. And then if you have some code in your function that uses this implementation, they don't need to change anything because the functions are the same. It's like you are defining a standard, a contract for your code. It's very good. It's very important. So keep practicing. Try to define different types of interfaces and use them in your projects. Now, the last thing that we are going to talk about in this section is using multiple interfaces. So let's say I have an interface for human. I also have interface for programmers, developers. This developer interface should have methods for programming language, and that's it. So here I have a contract, I have an interface called developer. So every class that implements this developer must have a function which is public and the name is programming language. So now if I want to use that in my class as well, if I want to implement that as well, I can simply add it with a comma here. AMIR implements human and developer. Now I will get an error again. Why? Because the class must be declared abstract or implement method programming language. So let's add that to our class here. Public function programming language. And here it says echo PHP. Perfect. Now our class works fine again. Now I can also say, okay, AMIR programming language, and I will get I can't fly and PHP. Perfect. This is how you can use multiple interface with your class. This is the end of this section. Let's go to the next one. Now let's talk about constants. Constants are like variables that can't be changed. Hence the name is constants and it's not a variable. You can define a constant by using the keyword const. And then you don't need the dollar sign to define the name of that constant. With variables, we had to write dollar sign and the name, but with const, I don't need to do that. I can write name. With constant, we can write name, no problem, but normally we use all uppercase. So it would be obvious that, hey, this is a constant and this is not a variable. After we define it, for example, I say name equals to AMIR. After we define that, we cannot change it at all. If I write, for example, name equals to, I don't know, H. Now if I run my code, phpindex.php, I will get an error because it didn't expect an equal sign, because you cannot change it again. If I create another const with the name, it will also throw an error because it says constant name already is defined. But with variables, we didn't have any issue. It would just simply update that. And when we want to use this constant again, we just simply write the name. We don't need the dollar sign. So I could write echo name and I would get no error and simply get the value of that constant. This constant now is a global constant. Every function, every method in my script can access this. But I could also create constant for specific classes. So for example, I could say class, I don't know, human, like you've already used many times. We say const and we can say name equals to human. Okay, first of all, this name cannot be changed inside the class. And the next thing is that if I want to access this name, I cannot use like human and then use arrows to do that. Do you remember when we talked about the static properties and methods? We use double colon. We should do the same here. We can call human and then the name. And if I echo this, I can simply get that without creating an object, without anything. I could simply access this human. If I changed it inside my class, I would get AMIR now. So this is the way to call constants inside the class. It's like static properties. That's everything you need to know about constants. Now let's go to the next topic. Now let's talk about abstract class. Well, in order to understand abstract classes, we should know 4 topics. The first topic is the class itself, and the second topic is inheritance, and the third topic is interface, and the last one is access modifiers. We have already talked about all of these subjects. If you want to freshen up your memories, just go back to the part that we talked about those topics and watch them again and come back to see the rest of this section. Well, what is an abstract class? Well, an abstract class is like an interface. So it has methods that are only defined but not implemented. But at the same time, it's like a class, normal class. We can have methods that are implemented. So it's like having best of both worlds. Let me show you an example. First, we will define it by abstract class human. And this abstract class can have properties like private name. This can have public functions like public function say hello, and this would echo hello. As I said before, we could also have methods that are not defined, like an interface. And in order to write such methods, we should use the keyword abstract. Abstract, protected, then we use the access modifier. We say, okay, I want to protect a function that says nationality, and that's it. Without any problem, we can write this. This function does not need to be implemented right now. This will be implemented by the children who extend this class. This function which is implemented, it's available for all the children, and we also have a property here. I could even make it public so everyone can access it. The abstract functions cannot be private because they should be implemented. So if I write private, my IDE is going to give me an error. It's going to show me that this is an error. This should be public or protected. So it would be implemented by the child. And if I go here, I can create a class like AMIR. This class should extend. For interface, we use implement, but for abstract class, we use extends human. Now I will get this red underline. Let me run my code to see what's the error. As you can see, it says class AMIR contains one abstract method and must therefore be declared or implement the remaining method. So now I should definitely implement this function. As soon as I declare it in my class, the error is gone. No problem. Now, because AMIR extends human, I have a public property called name. I have a function say hello, and I have a method nationality that should be implemented. For example, I could say echo my nationality is, and then the nationality of that object. Here I said that the abstract method can be public or protected. But here, when I extend human, I don't need the access modifier to be exactly the same. Here, I could write public, no problem, and it would still work. But I cannot change it to private because this is abstract. This should be public or protected. But if I change it to public, this should also be public. It cannot be protected. The implemented method should have the same level or a little bit higher. So if it's protected, this can be protected or public. But if it's public, it has to be public. It has to have the same level or a more inclusive access modifier. If we wanted to compare abstract class with interface, other than being able to implement the methods, there are some other differences. The first difference is that abstract class can have properties, but with an interface, I cannot have a property. But if I define an interface here, for example, interface test, if I write private or public even, if I have a public name, it will give me an error. Like, what are you doing? Interface cannot have properties. Yeah? Interfaces may not include member variable. And as you can see, there is a red underline by my ID under property. The other thing that is different between interfaces and abstract classes is that in an abstract class, we can have protected methods. But in an interface, all the methods should be public. So here, I cannot write private function test. I will get an error. Like, you cannot have private methods. You cannot have protected methods. Protected. Still, I cannot have that. All the methods should be public. Now I don't see an error. And the next difference is that if you want a class to implement a method, you should use implements, and for abstract class we use extend. When we use extend, obviously we cannot extend multiple abstract classes, but with implements we can implement multiple interfaces. That's the end of abstract class. Now let's go to the next topic. Now let's talk about traits. Do you remember when we talked about inheritance? A class can extend only one class. But what if you wanted to inherit multiple classes and have their functionalities in your class? Well, the answer is trait. We use traits to be able to solve the problem I mentioned. We define traits like this. Trait and the name of the trait. For example, example. And then inside the trait, we can do everything that we do in a class. We can have properties, we can have methods, and then when we go to our class, for example, class human, here, rather than using extends, I can write use example. That's it. Now I have all the functionalities and methods of this trait inside this human. So for example, let's say I have a trait speak, and this has a public method called speaking, and it echoes hello, I'm speaking. Now if I use this trait in my class, I can say AMIR is a new human. This human, which is AMIR, can speak. Now if I run the code, hello, I'm speaking. I haven't written one line of code in my human. I just used all the methods inside this speak. So what's the difference? The difference is that if I create a lot of traits, I can use all of them inside different classes and it's much cleaner. If I change it to class, then I have to extend it. I will get the same functionality, obviously, no problem, but I would be limited to only one, extend one parent. But here, if I use the trait itself again, I can easily have multiple traits and my class could use all of them. I could just list them here. For example, if I say there is another trait like eat. Hello, I'm eating. Then I can easily use eat here. And then I can say eating. This eating method is coming from eat trait, and the speaking method is coming from speak trait. Now I can run the code. Hello, I'm speaking. Hello, I'm eating. Both of them works perfectly fine. But if I used class, I couldn't extend speak and eat. This helps me structure my code in a very clean and organized manner. It would also help me avoid writing duplicated code. What's the difference between trait and interface? Well, interface, as we have already talked about, does not implement anything. It's just a skeleton. But trait is more like a class. It can implement all the function that it talks about. But interface is just a skeleton. And we have also talked about multiple traits like this with comma. You can list all of them at once, or you can say use speak and then use it. But I personally prefer the first way. You could just use comma and put them as a list, and both of them still works, no problem. That's the end of this section. Let's go to the next one.